I know I'm going to get canceled, but I need to say this. Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, is a fraud. She deceived her son his whole life, hiding the truth about his biological father from him. And the effects of that on the rapper's life may have been irreversible. No, I'm not exaggerating. If it weren't for Afeni Shakur's lies, Tupac might still be alive. Today I'm going to tell you the true story behind Tupac's Dear Mama. I'm Guilherme, and you're watching Decipher Hits.
Dear Mama.
At the height of the 90s, while he was still in prison, Tupac had the audacity to break all the rules of gangster rap and release one of the most beautiful love songs for his own mother, Dear Mama. And look, I'm not going to lie. Mother's Day always makes me emotional when I hear this song, reminding me of my endless love for my mother. But what I didn't realize is that Dear Mama was built on a lot of abandonment, parental alienation, and lies that Tupac's esteemed mother, Afeni Shakur, constantly told her son, keeping him from knowing his real father, Billy Garland. And man, there was no need for a DNA test. Tupac just had to look at his face and he wouldn't have any doubts. And Afeni knew that, but she preferred to hide the truth, and the lack of a father figure ended up dragging Tupac into a harmful environment where his only role models were outlaws and criminals of the worst kind.
My words aren't like those from a mother or father. They're like what you'd hear from a pimp, prostitute, hustler, or drug dealer. You know what I mean? But for me, those were my role models.
But all of that changed in 1994. That year, while Tupac was hospitalized, recovering from the 5 gunshots he took, Billy Garland finally managed to find out where his son was, visit him in the hospital, and tell him the whole truth. But from that point on, Afeni Shakur did everything she could to destroy the relationship between the two. She started a heavy smear campaign against Billy, reducing him to just a sperm donor and insinuating that he was only after the rapper's money.
The first one to try to cash in on Tupac's money was Billy Garland, known as the sperm donor, the father Tupac never knew.
You and I both know that I'm this boy's father. You and I both know that I'm this boy's father. And you insult me like this? I don't want the money. I just want to tell everyone that I'm Tupac Shakur's father.
Do you know who your biological father is?
After I got shot, a guy came saying he's my father, and he looks like me. He visited me in prison. His sons look like me.
So why don't you take a DNA test then?
That scares me.
But why did Afeni lie to Tupac for so long? And how could knowing the truth have saved the rapper's life? To answer that, we need to understand who was the woman who inspired Dear Mama. Afeni Shakur was born as Alice Faye Williams on January 10, 1947, in Lamberton, North Carolina. In 1958, at the age of 11, Alice and her sister moved to New York with their mother, after their parents separated due to constant arguments. At school, Alice showed exceptional reading and reasoning skills, easily standing out from the other students. In 9th grade, Alice was already writing for the school newspaper and even won a journalism award from the city's mayor. In 1962, Alice passed an entrance exam for 2 renowned institutions, the Bronx School of Science and the School of Arts in Manhattan. She chose the latter because she believed that artists were free-spirited people. However, Alice didn't have money to buy school supplies and, feeling excluded, dropped out after 1 semester. After that, she started wandering aimlessly and became a member of a Bronx street gang called the Disciples. But it was in 1968 that the biggest turning point in her life happened. At 21 years old, after hearing a speech by Bob Seale, one of the founders of the Black Panthers, she was captivated by the cause and decided to join the party. For those who don't know, the Black Panther Party, founded in 1968 by Huey P. Newton and Bob Seale, was a political movement that aimed to defend the rights of the black population and fight against police violence. They advocated for armed self-defense and created several social programs to support the community. It was at the Black Panther office in Harlem that Alice met Lumumba Shakur, the leader of the chapter whom she married in November 1968. Lumumba Shakur was a polygamous Muslim. He had 2 wives, and Feni became the second one. Of Islamic origin and with significant meaning, the one who is grateful. The surname Shakur carried great weight among the Panthers because it was used by those who renounced their European surnames, proving that the person was truly committed to the party's cause. Because of this, Alice Williams abandoned her birth name and from then on adopted the name Afeni Shakur, which means the one who loves the people and is grateful. With all of Afeni's knowledge, she quickly stood out among the Panthers, becoming a kind of intellectual leader. It was the following year, 1969, during a Panthers meeting in Harlem, that Afeni met Billy Garland, captain of the New Jersey chapter of the party. Billy was a standout basketball athlete who, after being outraged by the assassination of Martin Luther King, dropped out of school to join the Black Panthers. He had traveled to Harlem to help organize social programs, such as free breakfasts for underprivileged children and the establishment of community clinics. But despite the party's noble goal, the government saw the Black Panthers as a serious threat to the political system and responded by creating COINTELPRO, an FBI counterintelligence program designed to monitor and disrupt organizations that criticized the government. That was until April 2nd, 1969, when 21 members of the Black Panthers were arrested and accused of planning to bomb police stations, department stores, and various public places in New York. Among those arrested were Lumumba and Afeni Shakur. The case became known as the Panther 21 case. The judge set bail at $100,000, which is equivalent to almost $900,000 today. For each of the 21 suspects, the amount was far more than the party could afford, and if they were convicted, each member would face a sentence of 356 years in prison. Knowing about Afeni's intelligence, the members organized themselves and pooled their money to at least pay her bail, believing that Afeni could help free the others. In 1970, Afeni managed to get provisional release on bail, but Lumumba was still in prison. During this period, Afeni had an affair with a drug dealer and gangster named Kenneth Saunders, better known as Legs. And remember this name, because it's going to be important later on. But the affair was short, and soon after she started dating Billy Garland. Both of them were married at the time. The relationship lasted about 18 months, and it was during this time that Afeni ended up getting pregnant with Tupac. But by that time, Afeni still hadn't managed to resolve the case of the 21 Panthers, and her bail expired as soon as she was 5 months pregnant. Afeni ended up being arrested again and taken to the Women's Detention Center in Manhattan, one of the most precarious and dangerous in the city. When my bail was revoked, they didn't even let me bring my own food. I needed a court order just to have a boiled egg and a glass of milk a day. Tupac, to come into this world, had to be in my womb under the worst living conditions possible. But Afeni was a strong woman. At 24 years old, imprisoned and 8 months pregnant, she turned down the lawyer offered by the state and defended herself in court. Without any legal knowledge, she recited the laws from memory. Afeni cross-examined, questioned witnesses, and exposed an illegal FBI scheme in front of the judge and everyone present. She proved that all the crimes the Panthers were being accused of were actually planned by 3 undercover police officers. After an 8-month trial, which was the longest in New York's history at the time, the jury acquitted the defendants of all charges. And on May 13, 1971, exactly 1 month and 3 days before Tupac was born, Afeni was released from prison. As she says at the start of the Dear Mama music video,
"When I was pregnant in jail, I thought the baby would be born and he would never be with me, but I was acquitted 1 month and 3 days before Tupac was born. I was so happy because now I had a son."
When Tupac was born on June 16, 1971, Afeni registered him with the temporary name Lysan Parish Crooks, since the last name Shakur was highly targeted by the FBI. Besides that, she listed the father as deceased on the birth certificate. Billy Garland was upset, but he understood the circumstances. Recently released from prison, Afeni lived in constant fear of police retaliation, since officers kept watching her house and monitoring her every move. To make matters worse, she found herself completely alone in the world. Lumumba had abandoned her after realizing the baby had lighter skin and was obviously not his child. Legs was no saint either. Billy Garland already had another family, and for safety reasons, she herself decided to distance herself from the Black Panther Party. Around 1972 at 17, Afeni was talking with a group of women about what name to give her son. One of them had just returned from a trip to Peru and told the story of Emperor Tupac Amaru II, the indigenous Inca leader who fought against the Spanish colonizers in the 18th century. The name means shining serpent, symbolizing resistance and power. Afeni immediately liked the idea and started calling her son Tupac Amaru Shakur. I wanted him to have the name of revolutionary people, so he would know he was part of a global culture and not just a neighborhood, Afeni said in an interview. Despite his marriage, Billy often visited Afeni and remained present in Tupac's life, even taking him to his house in New Jersey, where Billy already had 2 children.
He would come to Jersey City and stay with his brothers and sisters. I was married at the time. He stayed for weeks and we had fun, but he was 2 years old, and no, actually he was 3. So we played ball. We played professional and semi-professional ball all over the East Coast. We were really good at it. In those tournaments, we were really good. Anyway, I took Tupac to the court, and the guys would always say, "Is this Malik? Because he looks so much like my other sons." And I would say, "No, this is Tupac." And they would say, "Oh, okay."
In 1975, Afeni married Mutulu Shakur, a political activist from the Black Liberation Army. Mutulu already had a son from another marriage named Moprem Shakur. And also in 1975, Mutulu and Afeni had a daughter named Sakiwa Shakur, who became Tupac's first and only biological sister. Despite the new marriage, Billy Garland continued to visit his son regularly until 1976, when Afeni cut off all contact with him.
Things happened. We weren't getting along. I don't know if she wanted more from me than I could give. I'm not sure.
How old was Tupac when you saw him for the last time before he became an adult?
I would say 5 or 6 years old.
5 or 6?
Yes.
So that's why he didn't remember you?
Yes.
While Tupac was growing up and already starting to ask questions, Fanny said that Mutulu was his stepfather, and that his real father had abandoned him in 1900. When Tupac turned 11 years old, Mutulu divorced Afeni. Now, as a single mother, Afeni once again had to work miracles to raise 2 children on her own, something Tupac remembers well in the song Dear Mama.
Because you cared for me, and I could see you coming home after...
I could see you coming home late from work, in the kitchen trying to make a hot meal for us. But now things got tough, trying to raise 2 wild kids on her own. But Afeni Shakur was not an ordinary mother. For her, education didn't just come from school, but also from understanding the real world. Afeni made Tupac read the New York Times newspaper every day, from cover to cover. And it wasn't just about reading either. After reading, Tupac had to choose a news story and discuss it. He had to analyze the causes, government failures, and how it affected the black community. Afeni used to say that if Tupac didn't know what was happening in the world, he would just be another person being manipulated by it. In 1983, at the age of 12, Tupac joined the Harlem Amateur Theater Group, showing that he would follow not only in his mother's intellectual footsteps, but also her artistic ones. In other words, despite the difficulties, things seemed to be heading in a good direction. But unfortunately, that family's home was about to be turned upside down. Still in '83, Afeni reconnected with Legs, the dealer she had an affair with in the 70s. But this time, she started a serious relationship with him. For Tupac, Legs was an amazing father. He took him to the barber to McDonald's and said he was his real father.
Can you tell me why you saw Legs as your father?
Because from what my mother told me, it was like, because he had already slept with her, he asked, "Did you have a child?" She said, "Yes." He came, saw me in bed, and I had a big head, just like now. Then he said, "That's my son. No need for a DNA test. He's my son." He took care of me, gave me money, but he was also a criminal, a drug dealer doing his thing.
But for Afeni, Legs was the beginning of her downfall. He introduced her to crack, a drug that Afeni quickly got addicted to, and that dragged her down an increasingly complicated path. In 1984, Legs suffered a heart attack caused by crack, and at 41 years old, he passed away. Over the years, Fanny had told Tupac different versions of who his real father was, that she didn't know who he was, that he had abandoned him, that he had died. So that's why when he wrote Dear Mama, still confused and not knowing the truth, Tupac mixed all the versions and said,
"No love for my daddy 'cause the coward wasn't there."
"No love for my father because that coward wasn't there. He died and I didn't cry because my anger wouldn't let me cry for a stranger." Later in 1984, Fanny Shakur moved with her children to Baltimore, in the state of Maryland. There, Tupac was enrolled in a highly renowned institution for artists, the Baltimore School for the Arts. It was there that Tupac studied and became skilled in acting, poetry, ballet, and also met his best friend, Jada Pinkett, who would later become one of the most successful actresses in Hollywood. But at home, things kept getting worse. With Fanny's addiction getting worse, she used the little money they had to buy drugs. So she was constantly being evicted and had to move all the time to increasingly worse places, as Billy Garland said in a 1997 interview.
Why did they move so much?
Well, it's because she was addicted to crack. She was using drugs at the time, and at one point she even lived in shelters. So Tupac really had a tough life.
Afeni herself has already talked about this phase of her life in an interview, saying, "There was no stability, I was smoking and messing up my life." In 1988, the family moved again to the county in California. But as Tupac grew up, he started to realize how unacceptable that situation was. In 1989, at the age of 17, he confronted his mother about her drug use and why she wasn't seeking help. Afeni didn't like her son's attitude at all. They ended up arguing, and his mother kicked him out of the house. Something he also mentions right in the first line of the song, Dear Mama.
When I was young, me and my mama had beef, 17 years old.
When I was younger, my mother and I fought. At 17 years old, I was kicked out of the house. After that, Tupac moved into an abandoned apartment with friends and, with no money, dropped out of school to try selling drugs. But according to Tupac himself, he tried for about 2 days and saw that he wasn't cut out for it. Then he worked at a pizzeria and later at a supermarket. It was during this time that he started writing raps under the stage name MC New York and formed his first group, Strictly Dope, where Tupac wrote lyrics about social inequality, visible racism, and fighting corruption. However, his career as MC New York unfortunately never took off. Well, and what about Billy Garland? Where was he all this time? So we have to remember that we're talking about the 90s back then. When someone moved and you didn't have their phone number, it was practically impossible to find them.
Back then, we didn't have computers. We didn't have the things you use today to find people. She would move, I would move. It was just different, man. It was different.
But it was back in '89 that Tupac met the person who would launch his career. Layla Steinberg. She was his poetry teacher and was so impressed with Tupac's writing skills that she decided to invest heavily in him. She became his mentor, show promoter, and even offered him a room in her house so he could stay until he got back on his feet. At the end of '89, Layla introduced Tupac to a guy named Atron Gregory, who was the manager of Digital Underground, a rap group that already had a solid fan base in Oakland, California. And Atron, in turn, introduced Tupac to Shock G, the group's lead vocalist.
This girl named Layla introduced me to Atron Gregory, who was the manager of Digital Underground. He said, "I'm going to send you over there. They're in the studio. You freestyle a rap for Shock G right then and there. If he likes it, we'll hire you."
Tupac killed it in the audition and was hired on the spot, but not for what he expected. At first, Tupac was just an intern. He carried equipment, set up the stage, and helped organize tours. But Tupac was humble enough to give his best in that role and learn as much as he could about the music industry. Little by little, he grew within the group. From being an assistant, he became a backup dancer, a hype man, until he had his first feature on a song in 1991 on the track Sam's Song.
Pac, go ahead and rock this. Now I clown around when I hang around with the underground girls used to...
Meanwhile, realizing her addiction was out of control, Afeni enrolled in a Narcotics Anonymous program for rehabilitation. Against all odds, she managed to overcome it. Also in '91, a friend of Tupac, Threat, from the group Naughty by Nature, was called to audition for a role in the movie. In the film Juice, a crime drama that would be released the following year, Tupac found out about the audition and decided to travel to New York to try out for the role. Given his theater and acting experience, Tupac was instantly approved and cast in the lead role.
That's bullshit, man. We run from the cops, we run from Rodamans, we run from security guards, we run from old man Quills and this fucking bullshit story.
In that same year, 1991, Tupac released his first solo album, Tupacalypse Now, with hits like Trapped. And Brando's Got a Baby.
I hear Brenda's got a baby, but Brenda's barely got a brain.
By the way, we've already decoded that in the channel's members area. The album catapulted Tupac's career to stardom. With success, Tupac started seeing a lot of money coming in. About 9 months after Afeni began her rehabilitation, Tupac sent his mother $5,000 by mail, even though their relationship was still a bit tense. In Dear Mama, he also remembers this moment, saying,
"Feels good putting money in your mailbox. I love paying rent when..."
It's good to put money in your mailbox. I love paying your rent when it's overdue. I hope you got that diamond necklace I sent you. And right after completing the rehabilitation program, Afeni and Tupac met again and reconciled. In 1992, the poster for the movie Juice started being promoted all over the country. And it's at this moment that Billy Garland sees his son again, after almost 15 years. And now, knowing where his son was, Billy tried to make contact. But at that point, the only way to contact Tupac was through his press agent, Karen Lee. Luckily, she was already friends with Billy, so they got in touch quickly. But when he said he would like to see his son again, Karen would only reply that Tupac was not ready for that yet. Later, Billy found out that it was Afeni who was instructing Karen to say that, and that she wasn't passing Billy's messages on to Tupac.
They told me he didn't want to see me yet. And I found out later that it was a lie.
In 1993, Tupac released his second album, Strictly for My Niggas, which featured hits like I Get Around.
Baby doll, you down, I get around.
Keep your head up.
Mother to be a mess. And since we all came from a woman, got.
And in 1994, he starts production on his third album, Me Against the World. It was during this time that he wrote Dear Mama. Tupac had just left a show at Madison Square Garden with the notorious B.I.G. when his friend DJ Master T gave him a cassette tape that was full of beats. It didn't take long for Tupac to call him, excited about one instrumental in particular, which was based on the song In My Wildest Dreams by the keyboardist Joe Sample.
Yo, Master T, drop something for my mama.
Master T said that when Tupac heard that beat, the words flowed from him so easily that he simply wrote all the lyrics to Dear Mama in the bathroom.
Master T gave me the beat, you know, the DJ, and I wrote it in the bathroom on the toilet during that classic morning ritual, you know. I wrote it and it just came out like tears. Right after I called my mom and sang it to her on the phone live, she started crying and I thought, this is going to be a hit.
For the chorus, Tupac brought in singers Reggie Green and Sweet Franklin, and was inspired by the song Sadie by the band The Spinners.
You know we love you, sweet Sadie.
According to Tupac himself, the song Dear Mama wasn't just about Afeni, but about all mothers. Anyway, Tupac did include a lot of personal things and even some very intimate revelations in the lyrics, such as mentioning Afeni Shakur's crack addiction.
And even as a crack fiend, mama.
And even as a crack addict, mama, you were always a black queen, mama. At first, Afeni didn't like Tupac revealing that publicly in the song at all, but later she understood that it was necessary, as she herself said in an interview in '97. I needed him to say how he felt, especially about the pain I had caused him. That's how we heal. But even before releasing the song, Tupac's life was turned upside down again. At the end of 1994, Tupac was ambushed and shot 5 times in a studio in New York. I've already told this whole story in the Deciphering Ruxosha video, but the fact is, after the attack, he was admitted to Bellevue Hospital Center in Manhattan. As soon as he heard about it, Billy Garland went straight to the hospital to see his son, even without Afeni's permission. When he got there, he said he was Tupac's father, but the security guards didn't believe him. It was at that moment that Afeni reluctantly said, "Let him in, he is his father."
And she said, yes, that's his father. Let him in.
Billy entered the room, and that's when Tupac finally found out who his biological father was. I thought my father was dead my whole life, but after I got shot, I looked up and saw a man who looked just like me. It was my father. That's when I found out. We hadn't done the blood test yet, but the guy looked a lot like me. I want to get to know him better, Tupac told Vibe magazine. But even face-to-face with Billy, they couldn't talk completely freely because Afeni was always sitting next to them, watching every move.
It was so uncomfortable. I'll never forget the first time we sat in a room together with her sitting between me and Tupac like a buffer, waiting to find out what we were going to talk about. But I didn't know she had lied. I didn't know.
It was only in 1995 when Tupac went to prison, for reasons I've already talked about in the Rachacha video, that Billy Garland finally managed to be alone with his son, and the two of them could really talk, open up, and truly connect. At that time, his father visited him almost every day. Tupac even tried to give him money, but Billy didn't want it. All he wanted was to strengthen his bond with his son. And as their closeness grew, Tupac started to reveal to Billy some darker details about his upbringing.
He told me some stories I don't want to discuss in detail. Things that happened in his house. He wasn't the beloved son that everyone is pretending he is now.
According to Billy, Tupac said he grew up being teased and called ugly by Afeni, just because he didn't look like the other family members. Billy connects this to the fact that Tupac looked a lot like him physically. In other words, since Afeni was angry at Billy, this was indirectly reflected in the way she treated her son. Billy went even further and said that Afeni's treatment of Tupac only changed after he became famous.
And that he was nothing until he started making money. Then he became the favorite son.
By the way, Tupac himself talks about this in the song Letter to My Unborn Child.
I
went to school, but I dropped out and left home because my mom said I was good for nothing, so I left. But she was proud when she saw her son hype up the crowd. More for Billy. The most important thing was what Tupac said at the end of the conversation. When they said visiting hours were over, he replied, I turned to him as I walked to the door and said, I love you. He replied, I love you too, Dad. That was all I needed, said Billy in an interview. Later in 1995, the album Me Against the World was released, with Tupac still in prison. The album quickly climbed the charts and became the first album by an incarcerated artist to reach #1. With its success, the demand for a video grew, and the record label had to quickly produce a music video without Tupac's presence. Using only scenes from his old music videos, footage of his mother, and a pair of child actors portraying the siblings Tupac and Sekwa. At the end of 1995, Tupac signed with Death Row Records and was released on bail paid by Suge Knight. After that, Billy had trouble keeping in touch with his son again. I was calling Death Row, and I found out they weren't passing the messages on to him. I thought he was thinking, well, my dad doesn't care about me. So we grew apart, Billy said in an interview. That lasted until September 7, 1996, when Tupac was shot 4 times in Las Vegas. And when he heard the news, Billy immediately took a flight from New Jersey to be by his side. When he got to the room, he saw Tupac in a coma on life support, but he knew Tupac could still hear him.
I just sat down and talked to him. The doctor said he could hear me and that it was good to talk to him.
The most serious injury had punctured Tupac's right lung, which had to be removed in surgery. For Billy and for many others, Tupac was going to pull through this. He had already been shot 5 times before, so getting out was just a matter of time. But his mother, Afeni Shakur, thought differently. After 6 days in the hospital on September 13th, Afeni Shakur made the decision to turn off the machines that were keeping Tupac alive. She believed that even if he survived, he wouldn't have the life he wanted. The doctors told her that Tupac would never be able to sing again and could live with severe disabilities. Without a doubt, it's a very controversial and delicate subject. But Billy Garland, who has already had lung cancer and now lives with 1.5 lungs, has said that he would never have turned off the machine and that Afeni did it without consulting him.
I wasn't at the hospital then. I wouldn't have approved of that. And I'm not saying that I know that even so he could have died, but I would never have said let him go. There's no way I would say that. No way. I would take him with half an arm and half a lung. But he would still be Tupac. He would still be Tupac.
Recently, Suge Knight claimed that it was Tupac himself who asked his mother not to bring him back. But we're talking about Suge Knight, right? The devil in the red suit. Tupac's real allies and people close to him never confirmed that, and actually said that Tupac wasn't even conscious enough to talk or ask for anything. The fact is that Tupac died at just 25 years old, and the next day, Afeni cremated her son without telling Billy Garland.
Tupac was cremated and you weren't invited. Did that bother you?
Yes, of course it did. Nobody cremates someone the next day. I think she didn't want them to do a DNA test, but we had already done the test before.
On the death certificate, Afeni wrote that Tupac's father was dead, which made her 100% responsible for Tupac's estate.
That broke my heart. It broke my heart. She could have talked to me. I didn't want Tupac's money. You're the mother. I don't care. But to disrespect me and treat me this way?
In 1997, Billy Garland sued the estate to obtain the right to be recognized as the father, even after his son's death. Afeni challenged it in court and requested a DNA test. Luckily, Billie had already done a test with Tupac before she cremated him, and the result came back positive. Billie Garland is Tupac's father. Even so, Afeni contested, claiming that Billie should not be recognized as the father because he was too absent in Tupac's life. The judge accepted the claim and Afeni won the house, remaining the sole person responsible for the estate until her passing on May 2nd, 2016. In her will, Afeni passed the estate to Tom Wally, an executive at Warner Brothers. Billie even questioned how Tupac's work, instead of going to the family, ended up in the hands of a white executive who didn't understand anything about the rapper's values and intentions. In a short time, Tom Wally began diverting huge amounts of money from the estate for his own benefit. He was even sued by Tupac's sister, Sekwa, in 2007. Man, if you study Tupac's history a little, it becomes obvious that this gangsta persona he took on after the movie Juice wasn't really him. It was just Tupac trying to find in the wrong places the validation he didn't get at home, a search that ended up costing him his own life.
I was the complete opposite of what I am now. I was quiet, withdrawn. I used to read a lot. I wrote poetry. I kept a diary. I used to watch TV all the time.
At what point in your youth were you introduced to this criminal mindset?
When I was there alone with nowhere to stay and no money, there were drug dealers, pimps, and criminals.
Why did you want to hang out with them?
They were the only ones who cared about me then. When I had nowhere to go...
But you said your mom always cared about you.
She tried, but she was lost at that moment. And she didn't care about herself at that moment. Because I was a man, I needed a father. I needed a male influence in my life. Those were the men. The others who might have influenced me positively were too afraid to come where I was. They lacked either money, courage, or something similar.
Regardless of who is right or wrong, the fact is that Tupac's life, although short, gifted the world with such a phenomenal catalog that it continues to change lives to this day. A prime example is the track Brenda's Got a Baby.
Yeah, Brenda's got a baby, but Brenda's barely got a brain, a damn.
Which, after 30 years, helped reveal Brenda's true identity and reunite her with her son in 2025. The most impressive thing is that his real story turned out to be much heavier than what Tupac sang in the lyrics. For those who can stomach it, I've already told all about this censorship on our members page. There are things so heavy that YouTube certainly wouldn't allow them to be posted here publicly. To watch, just click here on the bell and become a member of DISA for Hits. Thank you very much for watching up to this point. I'll see you in the next video.